Wall Street hopes to rebound today after big losses brought on by fears of a recession. The Dow Jones Industrial fell more than 800 points yesterday. That's a big drop, closing down more than 3%. It was the worst day for the Dow so far this year. The Nasdaq and the S&P 500 also lost about 3%. Earlier, the bond market flashed an ominous warning. The yield for 10-year Treasury notes fell below the 2-year rate, and that is seen as a reliable indicator of a possible recession.
With us now is David Rubenstein, co-founder and co-executive chairman of the Carlyle Group, one of the world's largest private equity firms. It manages, get this, $223 billion across 362 investments around the world. David, good morning.
Thank you.
How concerned are you about a recession?
Well, I'm somewhat concerned because we haven't had one for quite a while. Normally, since World War II, we've had recessions every 7 years on average. We haven't had one now for 10 years. So we're due for a recession, and I think there's some signs that we are going to head into one, but you can't know for certain until you're actually in it.
This warning signal that scared Wall Street yesterday, the so-called inverted yield curve, one of those mysterious things, but it's a significant signal, isn't it?
Whenever we've had an inverted yield curve, we've had a recession every time since 1955. So it's a good indicator, but doesn't mean it's going to happen tomorrow. The last time we had an inverted yield curve in 2006, it took about 500 days before we actually went into recession. And I should point out, when you're in a recession or out of recession, the U.S. government doesn't tell you you're in or out. It's decided by the National Bureau of Economic Research, which is a think tank in Cambridge, Massachusetts. The government doesn't want to be in the business of saying you're in or out of a recession. But you won't really know you're in a recession until a couple months after it's actually occurred.
Right. So if you're the average investor sitting at home right now, let's take somebody on the younger side of things, not close to retirement, and then also somebody who is close to retirement. What's your advice to them?
Don't panic. I think people who panic because they watch TV shows and all of a sudden they think that the world's falling apart. The world's not falling apart. We had a great recession a few years ago, and the world survived. It came back. It was painful during that time.
I think there's a lot of people who wouldn't say it was a great recession for them. I mean, for that person who's thinking, easy for him to say he's got $362 billion under management.
That it was big, but today, if we have a recession, nobody that I know of is expecting a recession of the type we had in 2007, 8, and 9. We're likely to have a more modest recession. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but you can never know for certain.
So David, I know it's always don't panic, sit tight. No. But David, guys in your position, women in your position always say, don't panic, everything will be fine. So at what point do you panic?
Good question.
I want to know when you panic so I can panic. So at what point should we be panicking?
When you reach my age, you don't tend to panic about very much. You just have to be alive. So, just being alive. When you get up every morning, you're alive. That's all that you have to worry about.
That's a win.
But for the rest of the mortals, at what point should we be panicking?
I think if all of a sudden the global economy were to go into a recession where China's growth is negative and Europe's growth is negative and ours is negative, that's one thing. Unemployment would go to higher than it is, that would be a problem. And all of a sudden, if we lost confidence in the institutions of our country, but right now I don't see that. We do have some problems. I think China trade agreement, not having that, is a challenge. People are very worried about whether we're going to go into recession because of lack of a deal with China. I think if we could get a deal, I think it would be good, but it won't be easy to get one. I think the administration is working on it, but the Chinese aren't people you can just push around so easily. They have their own considerations.
People worried about Brexit, too.
The president has pointed the finger at the Federal Reserve.
Well, Jay Powell is the chairman of the Federal Reserve. He used to work in our firm. I have a high degree of respect for him. He worked for us for about 8 years, and he's a very smart person. I want to point out, though, that Jay Powell is the chairman of the Federal Reserve Board, but he doesn't make decisions by himself. There's a FOMC, which actually goes ahead and makes the decisions about interest rates, and that consists of 10 to 12 people. And
do you think they raised rates too soon?
I can't say right now, but I would say it's more likely than not that they will decrease rates again. The market is anticipating a 50 basis points decrease in September. If that were to happen, I think the markets would be calmed down a bit about that.
The president has been very tough on Mr. Powell. Do you think his attacks are fair?
I think that Jay Powell has done a very good job in a difficult situation. It's hard to know which way the economy is going right now. And remember, he's reading the same economic data as everybody else. And it's not his decision alone. The decision about increasing or decreasing interest rates is made by the entire FOMC, and it's backed by the staff of the Federal Reserve Board. They're very competent people. I think we should have confidence in the Federal Reserve Board. They've done a very good job, and I think the Federal Reserve Board and its staff did a very good job in the last recession, and I think they're likely, if we go into recession again, to do a good job dealing with the problem. But it's too early to say we're in a recession.
And your bottom line is everybody exhale, we're going to be okay.
The sun will come up tomorrow. It's going to be okay, but, you have to be careful and don't take undue risks.
All right. David Rubenstein, We appreciate you being here. When it is time to panic, please come back. Let us know. In fact, call us first.
I'll call you and let
Leave
you know.
your number.
All right, thank you.